Hey everyone, I'm Huggy, and this time I'll be going through my process when sculpting a character for rendering. Subject for this video is one of my earliest characters, based on this render I did back in 2020. Oh boy, time flies. Looking back, I can really see a lot of mistakes and things I could have done better, so today I'll be sculpting that same character again, and see how much my style changed, so yeah. Let's remake some old art. Start things off, I'm blocking out my face in ZBrush. Starting with my default sphere, I'm really blocking out the major shapes and using Dynamesh. You can see the sculpt looks really rough at this stage, but that's completely normal. I'd say about the first 80% of the process, the model will be looking really alien-like, so don't sweat it, it'll get better. At this stage, I also sculpt the eyes as if they were closed, which makes it much easier for me to form the shape of the eyelids. The nose is fairly simple. I'm using the move brush to push the nose shape out and then carving out the nostrils. Nothing too fancy just yet. As for the mouth, I'd really like to carve in really deep so we get the chin shape in there, to then start sculpting the lips on top of that, using mainly the clay buildup and damn standard brushes, which are pretty much my favorites all around. You'll see me using those two a lot. And after blocking out the head, I start blocking out the neck and the torso. This won't be a full character, so I'll only be sculpting the upper body. I'm already sculpting some of the main shapes, but nothing too detailed just yet. We need a good foundation before any detailing happens. After the torso, I go back to the face, defining the cheek shape a little more, and overall touching up in some places. You see me doing this a lot as I go along, just constantly coming back and touch up in places that need some more attention. Now I'm sculpting the ear shape. If this were a human ear, I'd be doing this very early on, while I was blocking out the face, maybe even before the eyes. Like, I really like to do ears early. But since those are cat ears, I didn't really feel that rush. But still, I'm now shaping the ears and pinching the ends so it's a little sharper, just nothing fancy to it. After the ears, I'm now blocking out the breasts. I append the sphere using the IMM basic brush, and shaping that sphere using mainly the move brush. I try to keep a teardrop shape in mind when sculpting breasts, having a slight taper at the ends, while still thinking of the weight of them at the bottom. This is a very tricky shape to get right. As you can see, I'm tweaking things a lot, so I don't really have much to say about it. I'm just tweaking it until it looks good. And now I'm moving to Blender, which I'll be working on Retopology. Since that's a pretty simple sculpt, it's not exactly necessary to do it. You could use something like a Z-Remesher, Dynamesh, or even decimate the model, but I really like doing Retopology so I could get cleaner shapes more easily. For this, I'm using a Blender add-on called Retopoflow, which I highly recommend. It is definitely my preferred way of working with Retopology. I'm not really gonna touch into the more technical aspects in this video, so if you're interested in seeing me talk more about Retopo, please comment below. After Retopology, I start working on the UVs. These aren't really gonna be the most well optimized or anything, cause I don't really need it, so I'm mostly doing something that I could bake textures into. Now I'm modeling the eyes, something really simple, with the base eyeball making it a little flat on the iris area. This is the main eye mesh. And then making another sphere on top, which will be our eye shell, where all the shine and reflections go. Think of it as like a glass sphere on top of the eyes. Now I'm blocking out her bra, using Retopoflow to have the base shape, paying attention to the flow of everything, so my sculpting goes smoother later on. The bra shape would be slightly different than the original, since I really want to do something a little more fancy looking, with lacy parts, frills, and a little bow. Not sculpting yet, just blocking things out. And now for the choker. I won't be using Retopoflow for it, instead I'll use a cube and shrink wrap it to our model, similar to how I do Retopology without using Retopoflow. After applying the shrink wrap, I start giving it more depth by extruding the faces along its normals, but I'm more used to doing it like this. You can also use the solidify modifier for that same effect, but I'm way more used to doing it like this. And now I'm beveling the edges a little and making a little crease at the ends. Just pretty simple stuff, really. Now for the heart shape, I modeled the outline of it using vertices and then converting them to curved so I could have a more solid shape from it. Now back to ZBrush, I import all of the meshes back, first setting up things like creases and polygroups so it could make my sculpting much easier. And now I'll be transferring the details from our blockout to the new mesh, so I could properly sculpt the smaller shapes and details, while also cleaning up some of the rougher parts and touching up on the mistakes I might find. At this stage, I'm really looking to make things look very clean and sharp, just making her face very well defined. And now I'm doing some rough polypaint, blocking out her skin color and some of the red spots, like on her cheek and nose. I really like using the spray color setting with a rough looking alpha so things could look more natural and not too uniform. Now for the bra, I'm starting out as I usually do with the seams and edges. I made a video talking about how I approach clothing, and this won't be too different from it. At this stage, I'm also sculpting the frayed bits by masking some of the faces and using the move brush to displace them, and later on I'll be using the damn standard brush as well. At this point I'm also applying some color to the objects, just pretty simple stuff. And now I'll be blocking out some hair, which also deviate a little bit from the original model, but not too much, so it's still recognizable. So this isn't the final hair, but it'll still help me a lot later on. Starting out with a sphere and using the curved strap snap brush, which aside from having a pretty funny name, it's also very useful for blocking out the hair strands. And I'm now shaping the hair, using Dynamesh whenever I need, and I'll leave it pretty rough, cause I don't really need this hair mesh to be the cleanest, just knowing the main shapes and volumes will do. And now I'm gonna sculpt the folds of her bra. Going back to a lower resolution, I carve out the folds using the damn standard brush. And once again, I have an earlier video talking about my process with sculpting folds, so link in the description. For this bra, I'm going for a softer feeling fabric instead of the more elastic feel of the original. To achieve this, I'll make the cups extra frayed with some larger, smoother folds and some smaller, harder folds on top to give this very soft look and very like frayed, which is, I don't know, I think it's pretty neat. And now it's time to block out her shirt. Instead of doing it in Blender, as I did on the other parts, I'll be doing it here in ZBrush by making a rough selection and using the extract tool to get a base, then sculpting over some parts to hide the finer body details. And now I'm creating a couple polygroups so that would guide the topology while using ZRemesher. After I get a good mesh, I move it back to Blender, give it some UVs, which are, again, not the most optimized, but all I need really is the UV shells to be straight because of the flannel pattern. And now back to ZBrush, I'm carving out the seams of the shirt and doing some rough shaping, not doing too much as yet. And now, before posing, I'll be sculpting her eyebrows. That's a pretty simple setup. I'm using the standard brush with the striped alpha, and I'm now sculpting the eyebrows, paying a lot of attention to the overall shape and the flow of the strands, so it looks so nice. Now I'm sculpting the folds on the shirt, using mainly the damn standard brush, following the principles of pressure, flow, and stretch, which I go more in depth in my cloth video, still using that V shape I love so much. I'm not going too deep with the folds at this stage because most of them will still be based on the pose itself, so not going too deep so far. After that, I'll be using the transpose master to pose our character. I'll be going for something pretty similar to the original since the point of it's to compare to my past self. I'm mostly using the lasso mask and the gizmo, and then I'll be going with the move tool to make some smaller tweaks. After posing, I'll be fixing some of the rougher spots that were left here and there, and now I'm sculpting her facial expression. After all that, I'll now be further sculpting her shirt, making it look more natural by cleaning the outer edges, adding some volume, and making more folds. This time actually following the flow of the pose and everything. Now sculpting the smaller and sharper details as well. I'll now be using the IMM parts brush because it's a very quick and easy way to get shirt buttons. And now for some further poly painting. I still plan on making a video on this, but for now I'm painting more parts in red, making her skin look more pretty and lively. Now I'm painting some makeup using a softer alpha on the lips and a sharper one for the eyeliner. Of course with the help of Lazy Mouse because my hands aren't really the most steady. And then draw a cute little heart on her forehead. Now for modeling her teeth, nothing much to say really, just use the sphere and now I'm shaping it using the move and clay build-up brushes, duplicating them and placing it inside the mouth. Pretty simple stuff. After that, I start sculpting the finer skin details. For this, I'll be using a J. Hill's skin pack, which I highly recommend. I'm leaving a link for it in the description. Of course, there are a few ways to achieve good results without such brushes, but that's what I like using. So first I create a morph target with a clean face, and after that I start stamping the skin pores all over her face to later use the morph brush with a spray alpha to line things up in some places. I'm not really that great with those details yet, so I'm leaving J. Hill's video in the description, since it is still what I reference mostly and he does explain this so much better than I ever could. Before bringing the model back to Blender, I'll be using the Ambient Occlusion Z plugin, so I could paint some more shadows with a red color, again to give her skin some more life. And I'll be using the multi-map exporter to bait the Polypaint and normal maps for all the meshes. And now back to Blender. I imported all the meshes and will now set up the materials with the maps I just exported, to then set up a basic scene using some simple lights. And I'll now add some of the fancier textures, which is this flannel shirt one that I made in Adobe Illustrator, and putting up some lace textures into her bra, which these I bought on a pack on ArtStation, which I'll also be linking there in the description. And after all that, it is time to make the hair. I'll be creating the hair using the hair cards method, which I'll be reusing the hair textures from a previous model that I baked using Photoshop. And the way I set up cards is by creating a plane and manually shaping this plane by creating and manipulating edge loops, and then using subdivision to make it all smoother. I usually like working in layers, dividing the meshes usually from back hair, top hair, side hair, and bangs. And of course, these layers will be different depending on the hairstyle, but that's what I'm going for with this one. Starting out with the thicker hair strands and leaving them progressively thinner. I'm looking to make a video talking about hair later on, so please let me know in the comments if that's something that interests you. I'll also use a similar method for the eyelashes, extruding a plane and using a texture for it. I'm also using this hair card method to make the furs on the ears, but right after I done everything I realized that I've forgotten to record it, so I'm sorry, but there'll be no footage for that. But I did make it on a pretty similar way to how I did the hair. And this is the result. I'm really happy with how she came out. It is pretty crazy seeing how much my art has changed and developed in the last 4 years, and I'm really curious to see how things would go after 4 more years, or even more than that. I just find it so cool just seeing how things unmorph and develop over the years, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to see how things go. So yeah. Thank you all for watching, and please give me a like if you enjoyed this, subscribe so you're tuned in for my next videos, and comment what you thought about the video. I always enjoy reading what you think. So yeah, this is Huggy, signing out. Love you all.